Hi Sonia, how are you today?
Oh, I'm brilliant, thank you.
That's all right then. It's lovely to have a chat with you today about the wellness and grief connection and building a pain-free future. I think this is going to be a really important thing for a lot of people with the wellness connection and the grief connection together, because I don't think there's an awareness of how closely those symptoms are linked, which we will talk about later. So, do you want to just say who you are to start with, and then I will introduce myself after people know who we are?
Yes. So my name's Sonia Jenkins. I'm a functional medicine certified health coach, or functional health coach for short. I help clients with chronic health conditions to modify their lifestyle, to reduce their medication load through skills, not pills.
Yeah, that's amazing. That'll be I'm really looking forward to having this chat with you, because I think it's really going to reveal some lifestyle tips that can really help people without having to turn to the medication. That's great. I'm Tracy Redwood. I'm Tracy, known as Tracy Jane, the Grief Whisperer. I'm very concerned about the amount of unawareness and illiteracy in our society about grief. And grief could be a very different journey for people if they are well and healthy and have the correct habits in place. And I think that's where the overlap is between the two of us in our industries, to try and make pain easier through grief, through wellness when we have pain through an illness as well. I think we will address that really well today. So I'm the grief specialist, you're the functional health specialist. Between us, we hope we can help people, which would be great.
Correct. People often wonder where the wellness and the grief connection comes from. And if I can just bring people's attention to grief is one of the top stressors. And it's the same as the same stressor that grief causes stressed us, and it has the same effect on your body, and it evokes a fight, flight, or freeze response. So even though it's seen as an emotional symptom, it actually affects your body, mind, spirit, and your social setting.
Yeah, bang on. Completely right. And actually, the stress, whatever the stress is, be it grief or a normal loss in life or just a move of house, all of those evoke a response in our minds and our bodies. And they can be really quite take a toll emotionally, as you said, and physically on our bodies. So we need to be looking after ourselves. So yeah.
And
So
certain things, and some of the examples of the symptoms which people would not think was anything to do with their grief is general aches and pains,
yeah,
low energy, you feel like you're running on empty, low concentration, the brain fog,
yeah,
the muscle tensions, the tension headache, and the hypervigilant. You're really nervous and jumpy, but you don't know why. All of those are symptoms of the stress that you are feeling, but we don't put them together because they're physical, and we think we should be having emotional or psychological symptoms.
yeah. No, very much so. And in grief as well, we probably will think, well, this is natural. I should be feeling like this. And that's very easy to get into, though it's normal, when actually it might be something that does need looking at, because you get like you said, low energy. You get very tired with grief because the body's in shock. So it's having to work twice as hard. So we need more rest. We need more sleep because of that. And like you said, you're hyper vigilant because your emotions are on high, which means your brain isn't clear and that you've got this brain fog going on. And I call it grief fog as well, because the brain is working at two different opposite. We have two parts of our brain and they work in opposite they work against each other. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
They work against each other during grief. So you've got this confusion that goes on. There's nothing harmonious going on in the body. So it is very like, the two things are very similar, and in a lot of ways in the toll they take on our body. So yeah, no, all of those symptoms are ones we certainly experience in grief as well. So very, very closely connected, really. Yeah, so we were talking about the mind and the body as well, and the connection there is such a strong one, because the mind influences how, if the mind's not well, the body's not well, and if the body's not well, the mind's not well, because the mind is very much the like epicenter, if you like, of all the things that go on in our body. And if that's not working properly, the body's not functioning properly. And am I right in thinking the immune system just tends to go into just a stasis? If it doesn't really know what it's doing, it just sits quietly and doesn't do anything because it's not having any instructions. Is that right, Sonia?
When you're in the fight or flight or freeze state, your body is all about survival. So all the nutrients and everything goes to your limbs. So your digestion shuts down, your immune shuts down, your libido shuts down, because when you are fighting for survival, you don't need those at that time. And if you keep going through this state and not calming it down, then you start running on empty, because we are not meant to be under stress 24/7, which chronic stress is. Like a car on the M4 going 24/7 rather than twiddling through the A roads, is how I like to put it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good illustration, actually. So it's this business of the constant stress. We're designed to deal with stress on short term, but the constant stress is what does us the damage. And we need to look at ways of bringing that stress to an end, or managing that long-term stress better, don't we? Or
Exactly.
in a way.
And that's why if we don't, then that constant stress does lead to disease.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense then. So there's an awful lot of that connection between mind and body that's supposed to be looking after one another. And actually, in a long-term stress, it's not harmonious, is it? It's not protecting each element, basically.
Something that starts off being protective ends up causing us damage, because say you cut yourself, it'll bleed, then there's inflammation, then a scab forms, etc. With stress, chronic stress, it's like picking at that scab all the time. You don't give it time to heal.
Yeah, I think you find the same as me. They usually come to you once it's at the crisis point, rather than being aware of the good habits and making you well prior, and living a healthier lifestyle than you do at the moment. That people often wait until it's got to the point where it can no longer be dealt with, and then it's, oh, I need some help now, rather than being a bit more proactive if we can. Earlier on would make all the difference, because then the recovery would be quicker as well. We would manage it better, and we would recover quickly, and our bodies would recover quickly if we didn't wait till it got to that crisis point. Because very often people don't reach out for help until they cannot actually cope with it anymore. And I think that's a big thing, and to be courageous to say, actually, I think this is possibly getting out of hand now. Perhaps I do need to speak to somebody before it gets a lot worse. That's quite, like you said, that's a difficult thing to do.
And I also feel that how people deal with stress before a loss is also an indication of how they may deal with the loss. Because when you're under stress with grief, or your filters, let's say, are lowered, then you revert to type. So if your way of coping with life is to keep it all to yourself, and it's getting across, it isn't a weakness to ask for help, it's actually a strength. So, I find that gives me a bit of an indication, if I am speaking to someone, how they deal with
everyday
issues
stress
in their life. ordinarily, that also gives a good indication how somebody may fare through their grief journey.
Every one of us has coping mechanisms, don't they? We
Yeah.
all have our own coping mechanisms that we've learned as children and as we've grown older what we would do to make ourselves feel better.
Mm.
And those are the ones that get exacerbated when we go under chronic stress.
Yeah.
They really do show themselves, because that's the one thing we will turn to when we're feeling really awful, is we will use those coping mechanisms. And the majority of them are smoking, drinking, eating. I know myself, I'm a comfort eater.
Mm.
I'm definitely a comfort eater if I get under stress. Not like I used to be. I'm much better.
Yeah.
But I know that's what I will turn to as food for me. That's the one thing I do turn to. But majority of us have the major ones, and that is something that can be changed. It's possible to change those coping mechanisms so that we cope better with stress in life. Really,
I call them self-medication.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yes. Yes. So I tend to say to people, if they come in with they're overweight or whatever, and I say, so what are you self-medicating for? And that is the symptom. So going back to my functional medicine, the overeat, the weight might be the symptom. Yeah. But what are they self-medicating? So what is the root cause of them self-medicating? And I must admit, I do say to people initially, whatever your drug of choice, okay, be it smoking, drinking, eating, whatever, you know, yes, you're allowed that for a week. Yeah. And then you can't put it away. You have to put it away, because grief, in my opinion, and you can correct me if I'm right, the thing is, if you do not deal with the grief, it's waiting for you. When you are ready to deal with it. It doesn't suddenly just disappear.
No.
As much as you may be self-medicating to cope,
manage it,
eventually you got to work through the grief to come out the other side, or to get to a stage where you're able to cope with the loss.
Do you this is a question I'm going to throw at you now, and you probably won't thank me for it. So do you think that's the same with maybe long-term illness then?
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because when I was looking at our title, the way I looked at it was living well through grief, or living. So with my long-term conditions, mine is living well with diabetes, living well with heart disease. So my brain, when I'm dealing with grief, is that I'm all about living well.
Just taking you back to that long-term illness point, people don't think of it, but there's a lot of little losses of grief we have in our life as well. And when you've got a long-term illness, you can often grieve for the life you had when you were well. And we don't realize we're flexing our grief muscles when we're doing that as well, but we're not aware of it because it's not on the same level as when we lose somebody. And people are unaware sometimes that people with a long-term illness really struggle because they're still wanting the life they had before, and having to accept the new way they now live can be really frustrating and really hard for them sometimes. And again, this is where the wellness comes in, because the weller we are when we develop a long-term illness, our coping mechanisms, are the way we see things, like you've talked about perceptions, is going to make that journey a lot more acceptable for accepting where we are now and living well in that situation. So like not getting proper medication from the doctor, but getting something natural that is better for our bodies, that sort of thing is a huge thing now. And I think we have to remember that people are still grieving, because we always think of grief as somebody dying, but you can have loss of a job, you can have kids leaving home, they're all part, but that all needs us to be well as mums. When our
Yeah.
children leave home, we need to have the right perspective on it and to be well and have the good habits in place, because that's another disturbance in our lives, isn't it? So brilliant.
Yeah,
Excellent.
so grieving, if we can align it with loss, so if you think, okay, me and my 9 stresses here, so death of a spouse is number 1, divorce is a loss, imprisonment is a loss, a death of a close family member or friend, injury or illness, like you just said, marriage,
really,
because it's loss of your independence, because now you are
part of a unit and you have to consider somebody else as well.
Job loss, marriage reconciliation, and retirement. So if you think, again, say with a loss of a spouse, that, that also causes, that's like a divorce. So it's not, and then your stability is rocked because that other person could have been contributing, financially, emotionally, and socially. So all these are, you just put in a loss on top of another loss on top of another. And no wonder, not being funny, people go temporary gaga, because it is too much to bear, and where do you start first?
And grief is defined in the dictionary as any change in a major circumstance. So anything that upsets the status quo in our normal everyday life and our minds is classed as stress and grief. And it's funny, we don't, in normal life, we think, oh no, grief is when somebody dies. We don't connect the two with loss, and it's all part and parcel. And actually that leads me to talk about, right from children, when we leave school and we leave our friends and we go to another school, we're already flexing our grief muscles, our loss muscles, but we don't see it because it's not registered on our normal spectrum, if you like, as being a loss. We lose a pet when we're a child. Again, another grief experience, and we're practicing because we're designed to manage these losses, but in a healthy way, not in an unhealthy way. So it's great to sort of talk about that. I think we should move on and talk about good habits and how they can ease our pain if we have good habits and lifestyles in place.
So I think of good habits as and I mean lifestyle habits. so I'm thinking of lifestyle habits. They can help to ease and relieve the pain of the grief journey. It is a rite of passage we do need to go through. So things to look at, I tend to feel, are making sure you have adequate sleep. Now, when people say sleep, it does cause me a little frustration, because I'm fine with 5 hours of sleep. No, you're not. You are actually, if you have less than 7 hours sleep, you are actually sleep deprived, because you need that amount of time for your brain to spring clean at night, to digest your food, recuperate, and to repair. So if you're not giving yourself enough time to do that, then you don't start the next day on the right foot. So when they say to people, oh, you got out of the bed the wrong side, basically didn't have enough sleep. And the spring cleaning of the brain happens in the last part of your sleep. If you don't have your full complement of sleep, or you're not sleeping deeply enough, then you're not going through those processes, so you don't start the day on the right foot.
Yeah.
And during the grief process or stress process, I do say to people, if you need to nap, listen to your body, because if you can't
Yeah.
sleep the
Perfect.
full time,
Yeah.
take those naps.
Yeah. This is something I say to my grieving clients, actually. This is where if you go to bed at a regular time and you get a good night's sleep prior to the trauma of your grief,
Yeah.
very often your body will be tired, even if you can't sleep and your emotions are all swirling around, you can still rest. The biggest thing is rest.
Yeah.
And to go and just even if you can't close your eyes, rest, read a book, close your eyes and turn the light off, but listen to something very gentle so that you've got that relaxation going on. Because I know that within the brain, what goes on when you lose somebody or when you have a chronic stress, the brain will not settle, and you need to have those habits of either reading a book when you go to bed, listening to music, lose all electronics if you can. You know, this business of teaching the body, oh, it's bedtime.
Yeah.
That when if you've got a good nighttime habit and then you have a loss of some sort, your body will be tired, so you will sleep better or slightly longer than you would if you didn't, if you're up at all hours and you go to bed at different times.
Yeah.
It will make a huge difference. And like you said, even if you rest or you sleep for that hour, your body will still do some repairing that it wouldn't do if you didn't have that good sleep habit in place. It's just really, really important for us to rest, because the fatigue that comes with chronic stress and with grief is so huge on the body, and the body is just so tired because it's having to work so hard with the shock and the trauma, that actually we need to be resting more. And I encourage in one of my mini courses to, if you're tired, go to sleep. If you're working and you're tired, have a nap, come back to work. Work can wait.
Right.
We really need to put this rest business first, because the more we rest, the more our body repairs, our brain repairs, the quicker we recover. It makes a huge difference.
And just to add to that, when I'm glad you said read a book, because people might read on a Kindle or something like that. And if you look at reading a book, your eyes are going from side to side. That side to side
Exactly.
movement helps your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your calming nervous system, to jump in.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, with the electronics, I tend to say to people, as part of the sleep hygiene, that's what we call it, the sleep hygiene, is that you do no screens for 60 to 90 minutes before you go to bed.
Yes.
Because the light from those screens tells your brain that is daytime, not sleep time.
Yes.
And the melatonin then is disrupted. So I just wanted to put those in.
That's fine. The other thing I think with reading as well, which I forgot to mention, is it's the distraction from all the trauma going on, all the grief going on around you. Your brain switches off and it just focuses on what you're reading. And that in itself can be a break from the grief, from the stress, from the loss, all of that. It can help just give that brain a break so it can begin to come back round a bit before it sleeps. Good. What was the next one you had, Sonia?
We had your diet and nutrition.
Yes.
Now, some people, when they're under stress, say eat, and other people have no appetite at all.
Yeah.
So depending which one you are, yes, it's okay to graze, but graze on nutrient dense foods, so that the small amount of foods you're having is nourishing your body. I know we either want the salty snacks or the carbohydrates or the sugary snacks, but all they do is give you a boost and then you crash, and
Yeah.
you don't want that. So
No.
even if you are grazing, try and graze on nutrient dense food, which is nourishing your body, rather than, the short fix, which makes you
Yeah.
feel worse after.
Yeah, that's something I recommend. Even if we don't feel like eating, even if it's just a handful of nuts. So I would say beans on toast, nuts, quick and easy foods that we don't have to think about when we're in this state of stress, but nutritional food. So your vegetables, things that don't take long to prepare as well. I mean, what would you recommend? What sort of foods are we talking about, Sonia? Just so people know
Did I tell
that
you
we've got
I'm
an
smiling? I'm thinking, those food parcels which people like to bring you, they'll bring you that pot of stew, that
yeah,
soup, yes,
yeah,
please, because
yes,
you can't be bothered to cook. And if somebody has done it for you, it's there, easy for you to warm up.
yeah,
And that's what I mean when I say about, the support that people give,
yeah.
So,
That's perfect. So
and I
anybody,
tend to say whatever you fancy, but just take the support, because other
yeah,
people will do your thinking for you while you're not in that frame of mind.
yeah. And I think a lot of people go, oh, they brought me all this food, but actually those other people needed to do that because that's the only way they felt they could make a difference to you.
Yeah,
They hadn't
support. Yeah.
experienced the grief, but
Yeah.
their act of supporting you and loving you was to bring you this food. And like you say, having that quick and easy, just heat up, and if somebody's cooked food,
With
that's going to
love.
be more nutritional
Mm.
than bringing you a ready meal.
Yeah.
So take that on board, even if you don't feel like eating, just 2 mouthfuls
Yeah.
is going to be better for you, because the immune system will need feeding to wake it up,
Yeah.
to get it to come back to its normality. It's going to need a bit of poking and prodding to say,
Yeah.
look, you still need just a couple of these things, just take this on board.
I need food which is closer to its natural form.
As possible.
So there's a saying that one of my mentors use. If God made it, it's fine. If man made it, stay away.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. If it's
You know,
natural, it's okay. If it's come from, it's been processed, forget it.
exactly,
Yeah. No,
exactly.
that's brilliant. That's
Yeah.
really good.
And while we're talking about nutrition, don't forget the fluids as well. Keep
Ah,
yourself hydrated.
okay. Yeah, brilliant. So that's helpful for everybody.
And another thing, so the next thing I tend to advise is get your butt out your house.
Yes,
Movement,
exercise. Big thing.
movement. Because, okay, yes, initially you need to sit and reflect, etc. But if
Yeah.
you get out of doors, even if it's just going for a walk around the block, you get in fresh
Mhm.
air, you're going to bump into people, and it
Yeah.
stops you staying in your head. And I'm not saying you've
Yes.
got to go to
Yeah.
the gym or, take up
No.
running, just one foot in front of the other. You don't need any special equipment. And
Nope.
even meeting a friend for coffee. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just, you're out the house, you're meeting other people, you're moving.
Yeah, because the movement causes the endorphins, and endorphins is our natural painkiller and our natural, um, it produces, oh, now you'll probably know this, I don't. It
Endomorphs.
produces one of our happy hormones, doesn't it? It
And yeah,
stimulates one of our happy
yeah,
hormones, so it improves our mood. I can't I can't think, it's not dopamine, it's the other one, but it's part of the love setup, where
yeah,
it produces this happy hormone. So our mood improves
yes,
because we're moving, and it stimulates this in our body. So that can really help. And what I say to some of my clients is, if you've got a good friend, what I would say is every Wednesday you go for a coffee,
yes.
because then your friend knows that's
Routine.
happening, you know that's happening, and you've got something there that's going to be a distraction as well for that half hour to an hour. And even better, if you can walk to meet that friend, you will feel so much better afterwards, just because of that exercise. And the other thing I say to people is, if you really, really are feeling I mean, grief doesn't, what's it, how does the phrase go? Grief doesn't flourish in isolation. You need company. You need to meet others. You need that connection to heal. So the more you can get out when you are going through loss or grief, the better you will come back and recover from that stress, basically. And that's a huge thing. So grief doesn't recover in isolation. We do need, and I find, particularly with the grief brain you've got, if you've got somebody that you're regularly meeting and they know you're going through that, they might message you the night before and say, are we okay for coffee tomorrow? You know, and to get those regular meetings in place for the exercise to go and meet. So, you know, even if you're having a rough afternoon, ring somebody and say, I need to go for a walk, but I could do with some company. Are you up for half an hour?
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody else who's not sure about grief could manage half an hour for a good friend to just spend that time with them, doing the exercise with them. You know, if you've got a dog, walk the dog another, you know, the dogs don't mind how often they go out. They go out 3 times a day, they'll be well happy. You know, so if you've got a dog, walk your dog more. I know for me, when I lost my godmother, my dog had more walks than he'd ever had. And he wasn't bothered, but it really helped me because I was just able to get out and hear the birds, and that difference in the exercise and the way it makes you feel after you, it just boosts your mood. You really need that. That's exercise is such a big thing. The other thing I was going to say as well, if you really, really don't want to leave the house and you really are struggling with that connection business, housework is amazing. Just pull out the bed, do behind the bed. If you're feeling up to it and you're not fatigued, just some housework, putting the hoover around, that could get your heart rate up.
Yeah.
You know, just something small. And I know when we're going through grief, we don't feel like doing things like that, but maybe just putting a load of washing on and taking it out. Even if that's all you do all day, or you get out of bed and you shower and you go back to bed, you've still got that movement going on. So it's all, and it's all part and parcel of what we would build up to, basically. So can't express how good fresh air is for us. Even if you live in a town or a city, I know it sounds silly, but just walking around the block will do you, you know, nip across the road to see the neighbour for a coffee. Yeah, anything, just like you say, get out of those 4 walls will make a huge difference.
So my 4th pillar is the self-talk. Be kind to yourself. You know, the same thing goes round and round and round. If you can, if you're able, and somebody will sit and listen, bounce it off somebody else. Or the other thing is just write. You don't have to correct your grammar or anything like that. Just get a pen and paper and get the thoughts out of your head onto the paper, and then either shred it, burn it, whatever. But it's out of your head. And that's something I also say to people who have busy minds: before you go to bed, do a brain dump as well. So again, you're going to bed hopefully with your mind not so full.
Yeah, that is something I do with my grief clients, is if there's a particular guilt there, we write a letter to that person, and we express what we're feeling guilty about and why we're feeling guilty. And we look at all that, and it often brings a totally different perspective once they've written that letter. All right, we never send it, but it's that exercise of writing down and getting, because grief has to come out of the body in the same way stress has to come out of the body. They both need to come out so they don't damage. And writing pen to paper, or for the youngsters, you know, writing a note on your notes on your phone. Just getting
whatever
it
works.
Just getting it out onto something is hugely beneficial for us. Really good. Yeah.
And it's like you said, doing the notes on your phone, not doing it on a desktop, for the simple reason it doesn't have the same effect.
No, you go into work mode, then your brain becomes a work mode brain. It's not your personal life dealing with the stuff in your personal life. It becomes, and we have 2 sections in our brains. We have our professional mode and our self mode. And if we do it in professional mode, it doesn't affect the self then. So we need to do it you're very right. It needs to be done in the self setup, basically.
That doesn't help with the healing.
Definitely. And I think having this healthy mindset when it comes to stress is gonna change the way we deal with our stress and the coping mechanisms and the healthy habits we have in place will see us through and will give us that glass half full perspective, if you like. And I know people say, oh, I hate people who have the glass half full perspective, but actually statistically they fare better with illness, they
Yeah.
fare better with loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people say, oh, well, you need to learn that as a child. You don't. Like you're saying, you can reframe your thoughts and change your pattern of thinking so that you have this glass half full perspective so that you are well for longer and you can live healthier. There's a huge difference in that completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to touch a little bit on socializing with other people as well, how good that is for us too. As we've already talked about going and having a coffee with a friend and that, because a friend is the one that can often say, look how lucky you are. You have a family, you have somebody that loves you and looks after you. You have got wonderful children. You've got an amazing job. You know, we don't always see that. When we're in stress, our brains aren't thinking clearly, and when we're in loss. And sometimes we really, really need somebody else to say, hang on a minute, you're looking at all the negativity, you're hardwiring, you're going to that negativity a bit. Let's look at what you can do. So like with the long-term illness, what you can do is more important than what you can't do. And that
Gratitude.
can change, that can change the whole way we look at our lives, which is a really huge thing. And I think when it comes to grief, to look at somebody's passing as a celebration of their life rather than mourning on a funeral, when you put those two aspects together of the funeral and the celebration, they are complete opposites. Complete opposites. So we need to be looking for the joy in this natural process, not the sad negative side of it, basically.
Yeah.
You know,
I am grateful for the people in my life,
yeah,
you know, and things like that.
yeah. I'm
And
grateful I've got a roof over my head. Yeah,
exactly. And the person who may have passed, you know, it's like, I am grateful that I had them for the time I had them, because if I look back, my life would not have been as fulfilled if they weren't in my life. So would you say you rather not have them at all or be grateful for the time you did have them?
Yeah. And one of the things, again, I do with my clients is I look at memories. Memories are so important. And it's not until you open those floodgates, those memories. I've done that with a couple of my clients and they've gone, oh, actually, I remember this. I remember that. And then the memories really start. And actually, that brings back that love feeling, that comfort feeling of the amazing life that they had, particularly when it comes to spouses, the amazing life they had with that person. And that makes it a lot easier then to take them with you as you move forward.
Exactly. So finally, we were saying it's progression over perfection. So just tiny steps, you know, as we said earlier, there's no rule book for grieving. Just take small steps each day. And, you know, those steps then show how far you come. And, you know, it's not a race.
No.
And you will find you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you're still progressing. And, you know, grief is a natural response to loss.
Yeah, you're right. It's the language we use with ourselves, because I think sometimes we need to think, would our best friend actually be talking to us like we talk to ourselves?
Correct.
No, they wouldn't. They'd be saying, that happens to everybody. What you're going through is normal. Not we would, they wouldn't be berating us for doing something. And I think we forget that sometimes, that we're not compassionate with ourselves as we should be, particularly under stress. Because under stress, we're not thinking clearly, we're not being nice to ourselves. And I think we need that little voice sometimes to just be a bit more compassionate and say, you're doing okay. Even if you just get dressed today, that would be good. Even if you just take your vitamin D tablet today, so you'll start to feel better.
Yeah.
Let's just go for a 5-minute walk. Let's not go all the way around the block. Let's go up to the end of the road and back. Yeah, it's those little steps, isn't it, that make the difference and make the lasting changes, rather than trying to do it all at once and be up and ready to go out and be you know, party mode for everybody and then collapsing at the end of the day because you've done too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, the small changes are what we need to do with ourselves.
Yeah. Cool.
That's been amazing, Sonia. I've
It
really enjoyed working with
has.
you. Do you know what? You could do my job. You know everything. It's
No,
amazing.
let's just say in a past life, I did do some bereavement counselling for crews
Wonderful.
just before the pandemic. Just before the
Brilliant.
pandemic,
Yeah.
because I didn't know anything about bereavement, and I'm one of those
Ah,
people.
yes.
Oh, I don't know anything like that. Let's go down that rabbit hole.
No, it's wonderful because I think we overlap really well because my background in nursing helps me with what you're talking about with the body and the functional medicine and how our body functions on our food and on our sleep. So I understand all that. So I think we've overlapped really well in that way, which has been
Yeah,
absolutely wonderful.
which
So
meant
if
we could complement each other's
industry,
contributions.
yes.
And
Yes, which is wonderful. So if people want to have another chat with you, Sonia, how can they what's the best place to find you?
right, I would recommend that people visit my website, which
Okay.
is www.fmhc.uk. And then there is a contact me form on there.
Perfect.
Or if that's too much of a faff, I'm on all the social media platforms except for X.
Well done. You're doing better than I am then. And if people want to get hold of me, the Grief Whisperer, just to talk about their loved one, so that I can witness their grief for them to start them on the process of less stress with the grief, I can be found on Facebook and Instagram as the Grief Whisperer or Tracy Jane Redwood. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well. I haven't got a website purely on the basis that I haven't done one yet, but I will be getting to that. But we can both be found. If there are any questions about this recording, please put a comment in the bottom so we can get back to you and discuss anything with you that you find interesting or if you need any help with. But it's been lovely talking to you, Sonia.
Oh, it's been brilliant.